This is the primal scream of a dying regime.
Pray for our enemies, because we're going medieval on these people. You're just not got a free shot on all these networks lying about the people. The people have had a belly full of it. I know you don't like hearing that. I know you try to do everything in the world to stop that, but you're not going to stop it. It's going to happen.
And where do people like that go to share the big lie? MAGA media. I wish in my soul, I wish that any of these people had a conscience.
Ask yourself, what is my task and what is my purpose? If that answer is to save my country, this country will be saved.
War Room. Here's your host, Stephen K. Bannon.
It's Saturday, 15 August, year of our Lord, 2026. We're going to have a lot of moving targets today. We've got James O'Keefe's going to join us a while, but the situation going on down in or up in Minnesota about Muslims and voting. We've got Captain Fanell and McCabe are going to join us here momentarily about the situation in the Persian Gulf. Do we have James Fishback? We're trying to get James Fishback up and ready. We got him. Brother Fishback, this is the closing weekend to make your closing argument in this very, what can I say, heated contest in the Republican primary for the governorship of Florida to be nominated to run for governor. What's your thoughts on this weekend? I know you're doing 50 events, I think, in the next couple of days.
Yes, 50 events, Steve. The only heat I fear is the heat here in Jacksonville Beach. We got a crowd of over 150 people here ready to vote Fishback, to win this election, to win, to put America first, to fight for that vision for our country. And so, Steve, 16 events today. The first one was at 7 a.m. The last one, Steve, begins at 1 a.m., and it's going to be historic. We are going to win this thing. I got my running mate, Sean Lozano, here, the great people of Jacksonville Beach. If you're in Florida, early voting is open in every county. Go to votemyflorida.org, show up, vote Fishback, and let's take Florida back.
James, tell us why is your campaign gotten so much traction? You're running as a total outsider. It seems like the Republican establishment has done a pretty good job in Florida. What is your beef? What is the principal proposal you're running on, and why has it gotten traction, particularly with young people?
Well, the beef is pretty simple. Our generation is struggling to buy a home, to get a job, to keep a job, to raise a family, and our parents and grandparents are not being able to pass down the country that they enjoyed. I'm fighting for every single Floridian who calls our state home, for them to get a job, get married, start a family, live out the full arc of the American dream. We do not worship globalism or corporatism. It's two words from here on out, Steve, and that is America first.
Do you believe the business interests has had too much say so in the governance of Florida, and that's one of the reasons it looks like you may be losing the old Florida that people absolutely loved and kind of cherished, and you're getting a bunch of, I don't want to say Yankees, but people coming from the north and other sections of the country with corporate interests that are taking that dream away from average working class and middle class Floridians?
That's right. And look, Floridians, we don't want a data center, guys. We don't want another solar farm. We don't need another Dollar Tree next to a Dollar General next to a whatever the heck a Five Below is. we don't want that, Steve. We want great jobs. We want to enjoy the outdoors. We got the Atlantic just a few blocks from here. This is the state that we want. We're not a construction site. We're not a balance sheet. Florida is our home, and that is what this campaign is fighting for. We are on the cusp of a historic victory, the likes of which rivals Donald Trump in 2016, Ronald Reagan in 1980, and our founding fathers in 1776. We got young and old, black and white, rich and poor, from Jacksonville down to Miami, lined up to vote for this campaign, and we are on the precipice of greatness.
James, why has this message, your message, particularly resonated with young people? Many of those people have been outside the political system. We would call them low propensity voters. Why has your message resonated with those folks?
Well, the political pundits call them low propensity voters. I call them my friends and family. My friend recently from Florida State University, who got a 4.0 GPA, applied to 100 different positions at Amazon, only to be told that they're not hiring Americans right now, only H-1Bs. India. Jeff Bozo needs a very clear message from me that if you are going to hire H-1Bs and refuse to hire qualified Americans, you're going to get slapped with massive fines because we are going to put Florida workers first again.
Talk to me about, okay, H-1Bs and data centers. Those are two of the hottest issues that you've really driven to the forefront. Let's go back to H-1Bs. What do you, as governor, given it's a federal program, and you're right, I think Amazon has something like 75,000 or 85,000 foreign engineers alone and tech specialists. What are you, as Governor Fishback in Florida, going to do about H-1B visas?
It started as a federal issue, but we can end it at the state level. Here's my simple request. Companies that fire a local from Jacksonville who went to UNF or JU, who was making 80 grand a year, only to hire an H-1B and pay him 60 grand a year, that difference, that cost savings that motivated that firing of $20,000, we're going to slap a $20,000 annual fine on any company that tries to arbitrage our workforce. You do that and the H-1 scam disappears overnight, and our workers have a fighting chance again in this economy.
James, birthright citizenship. As governor of Florida, will you continue to issue birth certificates to anchor babies?
No, I will not. The federal government has punted on this issue. The Supreme Court has punted on this issue. As governor, I will not punt on this issue. If you come over here from China on vacation with the express purpose of having a bunch of babies to give them American citizenship so you can engage in chain migration, we are not going to give you a birth certificate because birthright citizenship is not for illegal aliens in the United States.
James, how are you talk to us about your policy about data centers? Does it concern you, if you're as anti-data centers as you seem to be, that you're going to hurt the growth of Florida, particularly with big tech, sir?
No, we want good growth here in Florida. I'm pro-AI, I'm pro-innovation, but we don't want a data center 2 miles up the road from a small community that's going to raise their electric bills, threaten their water supply, and tank their property values. You know who's not clamoring to build a data center in Florida? Elon Musk. Elon tells me we should build these small modular data centers and ship them into space. What better place to do that than the Space Coast, and use great engineers from the First Coast to make that happen? I'm fighting for that reality.
Are you against on the data centers more than just the hyperscalers? Are you against all data centers?
Look, if you have a 911 operations center with 100 servers, that's not exactly an Amazon or Meta data center. When we talk about data centers, we're talking about the things that make a Costco look like a 7-Eleven. These massive monstrosities, 2 million square feet. They have to go. As governor, I'm the only one who's going to stop them from building a data center in your community.
James, your principal competitors here are a guy who served in Congress many years, I think in the State House or in the legislature before that. You got a former Speaker of the House, and you got an existing Lieutenant Governor. How are you going to handle Tallahassee? Because the Tallahassee Assembly is known as one of the most rough and tumble places, state capitals in America. How's Fishback, with no experience, going to handle that crowd?
Oh, I've got plenty of experience, but I'll tell you right now, I don't have political experience, nor do I want political experience. Political experience has gotten into this mess. You know, my opponents combined, they have 3 decades of political experience. It begs the question, if they had a plan to make life better and more affordable in Florida, why haven't they done it already? So what I bring is business experience and the experience of knowing that in Florida, we put America first. We need a patriot.
James, what is your closing argument? Give me a minute or two on the closing argument you're making to Floridians of why they should go cut against the grain and support a fire-breathing populist firebrand, sir.
Well, Steve, my closing argument won't even be 2 minutes. I'll make it 30 seconds. I'm a fourth-generation Floridian, born and raised in South Florida. Me and Broward, my wife and Dade, we now live in the Panhandle. We own a business. We know what it's like, and we see our state getting crushed left, right, and center. We're fighting for the Constitution, fighting for common sense conservatism, fighting to protect our parents and grandparents on Social Security, our friends for being able to buy a home and start a family. And I don't want anyone to take my word for it, because the days of trust me, bro, politics are over. I want you to go to fishbackcontract.com. That's where I've signed a legally binding contract, the only person in this race to do so, that says that if I break a single promise to you, I cannot run for re-election. I did that, Steve, because I believe in accountability, I believe in the Constitution, I believe in America, and I believe in putting Florida first.
James, if someone in our audience wants to be there for a live event, where do folks go? How do they make contact with you? How do they find out more? But most importantly, how do they find out where the live events are so they can join up if they wish?
If they wish, we got 150 here, 14 more events to go. They go to fishback2026.com to learn more about our platform, and on social media, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, they can see our live events. And guess what? If any voter out there in Florida is undecided and you have a question for me, yes, for me, I want you to email me personally at my email, james@fishback2026.com. You email me by tonight at midnight, and I will guarantee you a response before noon on Tuesday. You got to show up. You got to earn votes. And Steve, that is what we're doing. Thank you so much.
James Fishback, thank you, and thank the crowd down there. Fantastic. Great energy on a Saturday morning to kick things off. Appreciate you and appreciate everybody down there.
Thank you.
Wow. Pretty impressive. The fire breathing. Look, it's the polling shows Byron Donalds had a pretty significant lead during this entire thing, but I think most of the polling shows under 50%. So we're going to find out how this thing rolls on Tuesday. We've had Paul Renner, the former surface warfare officer, was with us yesterday for the second time. The lieutenant governor was with us Thursday. We're trying to get Byron back up. We're trying to get Rodriguez back up and try to do it all by Tuesday. That governor's race has got a lot of interest from around the country. Want to go. We got a lot to do about the United States Navy this morning. Captain Fanell, just got a couple of minutes here. Give me your assessment. I'm gonna save the stuff for the carrier battle group and everything after we have a cold open for you and McCabe, and Neil is at the White House right now. Your sense of how this is going. The president has claimed that a Strait of Hormuz, he's going to designate it as American territory. That's different from the MOU that basically invited Oman in as a partner to kind of negotiate with the Persians. What's your sense right now of where we stand with this, sir?
Well, I think we're still trying to pressurize Iran to open up the strait, and so the president is trying every possible vector of influence that he can bring to bear. And so making a statement like this will cause kerfuffles in Tehran and in DC, and it'll cause people to say, what about this and what about that? But it brings attention to the situation, and it highlights again the importance of why we need naval power and why we're in a situation where we haven't been able to reopen the strait like we have done in the previous years.
Captain, we're going to go to break here in a moment. The Washington Post has an exclusive this morning that the president's very involved in the design of the expanded fleet that he wants, and he's going to fight Congress to make sure we get the funding for it, including going back on certain designs to be closer to World War II types of designs for aircraft carriers. Also, to put in steam catapults. He's been obsessed with this since I've known him, even before he won the presidency, to get rid of the electronic catapults and the steam catapults. I tell you what, I'm going to leave that with you. We're going to go to a short break here. We're going to play a cold open. I got Captain James Fanell. And Captain Fanell, I think, has done 20 or 30 years on aircraft carriers. So he's got a lot of experience. Neil McCabe's at the White House. James O'Keefe is with us. Natalie Winters. Wow. Even more. Mo Bannon and Cleopatra. geopolitics, geoeconomics, capital markets, all next on a Saturday in the War Room.
When you talk to people in the military, there is a degree of stunned when you hear what the president said. But when I went to the White House today to ask if they had any context or wanted to clarify any of those president's comments, they said that they were just going to point back to what the president said, which is really kind of remarkable. I thought it was notable when the president was answering these questions. He was almost visibly irritated that he was being asked them. He kind of snapped after that first answer. And after the last answer, he sort of abruptly turned and walked away, which is not his norm when he's speaking on the tarmac. And all of it, I think, underscores what is the concern that you hear consistently among American officials, which is just how long this war has gone on. And these lengthy, historic deployments only remind the American public that the president's initial projection of 6 weeks was absolutely wrong. And this is not the only example that we have of this lengthy war, this very intense war, raising some real questions about American readiness. You also hear concerns about the munitions stockpile, and the worry that you hear from military officials is that the longer these deployments go on, the greater the toll will be, both on the people, but also on the ships. You know, gears wear out, replacement parts are hard to come by. And it was notable in that statement from the Navy Secretary today, which in a lot of ways was trying to dismiss all of this. He did acknowledge that, yes, the meal plans have been interrupted, that, yes, calls back home have been interrupted for operational security. And that's all part of the reason why you hear, described in these private conversations among officials, including with the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, Dan Kane, the need to find an off-ramp to this conflict. But President Trump, at least for his part, does not seem like he's ready to take that off-ramp. He's talking today about taking the Strait of Hormuz as U.S. territory. Yesterday, we heard Pete Hegseth say that the U.S. would be able to maintain the blockade of Iranian ports indefinitely. All of that would require a sustained American military presence, including with aircraft carriers in the region, which is a pretty striking turnabout for a president who talked about never entering a forever war.
We're bringing the prices way down. Look at what's happening, coming way down. And after we finish defeating Iran, which is being very badly defeated, pretty soon I'll be declaring the Hormuz Strait a territory of the United States.
But what does a commander-in-chief saying that in the context of what's happening right now actually mean to the United States military and the crew, 5,000 people on that ship?
Think about if you had a son or a daughter on that ship and the commander-in-chief dismissed your concerns and basically said, oh, you know what, it isn't even long enough. I will tell you unequivocally that all my 36 years of service, if any Navy chief or non-commissioned officer or admiral or general had ever said those kind of words, they would have been relieved within minutes. And I mean that literally. It is totally inappropriate that the commander-in-chief of all military show continued disdain and disrespect for our military members and for their family. This is unacceptable, whether it's talking about Gold Star mothers and fathers or whether we're talking about those young men and women on board the USS Abraham Lincoln. This is unacceptable by any commander-in-chief or any military leader.
Okay, the Trump derangement syndrome on this aspect, and it's quite serious, this situation. We're going to walk through it with people that have knowledge of this, Captain Fanell, myself, McCabe. It's serious, and they're weaponizing this just for attacks on the president. This blockade, Captain Fanell, let me go to you first, and I'll go to McCabe. McCabe's at the White House. I'll go to McCabe in a second. The blockade has been the forcing function of the one piece of leverage, as you and I talked, when we called for a blockade at the beginning of the war, that has worked. If you understand what's happening, and on Monday, I'll drill down a little more on this, as we have argued for a while here on the War Room, economic warfare, we're going to shift to full economic warfare, and Scott Besson is pretty bold out there talking about the types of things he's going to do. The blockade in the United States Navy, those two strike groups, are inextricably linked with the ability to pull that off. Now, Captain Fennell, you spent, I think, 3 decades on deployed on carriers, on and off. You know what's going on. I said, look, it's 5,000. When we deployed in a carrier battle group, if the carrier battle group had gone an entire deployment, the 6 to 8 months, that's kind of normal, and it lost just one crewman overboard, that would be, I think the captain would get the Navy Commendation Medal. I mean, on these carriers, particularly with flight decks and flight ops, the most dangerous place in the world, they're people, they're sailors going overboard, I'm not saying all the time, but a lot more frequently than one in 10 months. Also, the food and replenishment, there are always issues regarding this. And we understand it's harsh, particularly for young families. There's no doubt a lot of these sailors are young sailors. A lot of them are married. A lot of them the first time the wife with a couple of kids has ever had their husbands deployed, or in some cases their wives deployed with the guys back with the kids. So it's tough. But right now, it's not about the sailors. It's not about the deployment. It's not about really what's best for the Navy, best for the country. They're weaponizing this against the president. Captain Fennell, your thoughts on this?
Well, Steve, thanks for having me on. I was 29 years in the Navy, and in the first 20 years, I was on carriers at the squadron level, the carrier air wing level, and then at the strike group level, across in the Med, but mostly in the Pacific. And then the last years, I was on the Blue Ridge, which is the command ship for the 7th Fleet. So I've had sea duty in many places like you. And what you're just described is true. And I have a wide network of retired Navy colleagues, and we've been talking about this, very intensely for the last 48 hours. And to the best of our knowledge, the Lincoln has not lost any person from suicide. They had one guy that did jump over, and he was immediately picked up and removed from the ship. And another person climbed up on a rail, and he was prevented from jumping. And as you say, in the history of the Navy, this happens frequently. I was on a carrier myself up on the flight deck running, and a sailor that had gone to captain's mast was going to be assigned bread and water in the brig for 3 days, and he didn't want any part of that. And when he was released from the captain's mast and they were escorting him to the brig, he broke free and ran on the flight deck and ran to the fantail and jumped off. So it happens. Not everybody, and there are almost 6,000 people on these nuclear carriers with the air wing and the ship's company. So it happens. I would say that these long deployments are putting a stress on us. But as the Wall Street Journal said this today, the president's decision to strike Iran didn't cause the Navy's readiness issues of today. So what we're experiencing and what we're talking about is much, much larger than about just what's happening with Iran. It's a reflection of the neglect of the national security apparatus on having a strong Navy. And as I've said on this show repeatedly, in 1986, when I was commissioned, the United States Navy had 600 warships. Today, we have less than 300. How did that happen? How is it possible? Go back, and you played some great episodes with Natalie here in the last week about showing our senior 4-star officers in bed with the Chinese in front groups talking about how they're going to manage America's decline. Well, it's those kind of people that got us in a position, this kind of thinking, not just inside the Pentagon, but at the Hill and the Congress. And so we're reaping what we've sown in terms of, the stresses and strains on our sailors. I have colleagues that were on the Ranger, USS Ranger aircraft carrier in 1983 off of the North Arabian Sea, trying to keep the Strait of Hormuz open in 1983 because of Iranian small boat and RPG rocket-propelled grenade attacks against ships in the Strait. We've been doing this for a long time at various ebbs and flows. And so we're going to take the Lincoln away now, and we're going to replace it with our 4 deployed aircraft carrier, the George Washington, and we're going to leave a gap in the Pacific for some period of time. Okay. I'm hearing rumors.
Okay, hang on. Before I want to get to the gap, and I want to get to the geostrategic nature, but I want to go back. If there wasn't an issue, why did we so quickly trade out the carrier that's on patrol in the Pacific and there to make sure that the Chinese Communist Party understand that defense of Taiwan is a very high priority for us. Why did we switch it out so quickly? One of my concerns here is that, yes, this is a very stressful deployment. There's no doubt about it. We're going to get into it with McCabe about what happened in Bahrain in the early days of the war and how the Navy were still tied somewhat to these logistics chains inland. But why would you essentially all of a sudden the media puts pressure on some of the families are putting pressure on. Next thing you know, we're making this is a major geostrategic move. We're taking the carrier that is there so Japan and Korea and the Philippines and Taiwan and Vietnam know that the Navy's prepared to fight. We're taking that, and we're taking that now to the North Arabia Sea as we send the Lincoln back home, sir.
Right. That's my concern, is that we are responding to this political pressure, which is from the anti-president cadre that are on TV day after day. You didn't hear these same people, you didn't hear this General Manner get up and say it's unacceptable for the president to say this or that. Well, you know what's unacceptable is General Manner getting up and bad-mouthing the president of the United States. He's a retired officer. Why don't you just stow it and write your congressman and express it privately to them? That's not helpful. And so these same people never said anything when Joe Biden had sailors at sea and they were on deployment for long periods of time, or when Barack Obama was on president, but they only do it when Trump or Bush was president. I have another colleague that was on board the USS Abraham Lincoln in 2003 for the shock and awe campaign that occurred at that time against Iraq and Afghanistan. Guess how long they were on deployment in 2003? 290 days. So it's not unprecedented. This has happened before, but nobody's fixing the root cause.
Jim, hang on for 1 second. We'll take a short break. Captain Fennell, McCabe from the White House next.
War Room. Here's your host, Stephen K. Bannon.
Okay, Captain Fennell's with us. Natalie's going to join us here momentarily. I got McCabe at the White House. So, McCabe, give us an update. Where do we stand with this? Because regardless of the actual condition itself, it's now been weaponized into a massive political issue in Washington. Can you give us an update on what the reality is?
Well, I think what the messaging reality is that the Pentagon was sort of managing it at a very low level. Remember that CNN actually had a reporter embedded aboard Lincoln roughly a month ago. And I saw those reports, and she said everything's great and everybody's happy, and she went for an ice cream cone. Now the Pentagon is fully engaged with their messaging, starting with Acting Secretary of the Navy, Hung Cao, who put out a lengthy message yesterday. And I'll boil it down to it, is that our warriors are not victims. Stop trying to make this into more than it is. We are doing an exceptional job under extraordinary circumstances. And that was repeated by Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of War, and Sean Parnell, the comms director at the Department of War. He put out his own sort of quote tweet saying, I deployed overseas. I understand what it's like. These people are doing the best they can, and they're survivors, they're winners, they're warriors. Stop trying to make this into a victimhood story. That's the messaging from the Pentagon, Steve.
Hang on 1 second, Neil. We'll go back to Captain Fennell. Let's talk about these deployments. I mean, Captain, this has been a lengthy deployment. I think the 250 days at sea is, I think, setting some record, at least from the Vietnam era. And more importantly, unlike most deployments, this ship's company and the air wing have been at flight ops, particularly for the first half of this, have been at flight ops 24/7, right? In the most dangerous place, the most dangerous place on Earth is an aircraft carrier deck when you're in flight ops. And so these sailors and the pilots and the airmen of their crews, the entire ship's company, the officers, they've been at it. They've been at general quarters. I mean, this is a war, this is combat, and at least I think 50% of the sorties that have been flown, the Air Force has taken half, and the Navy's taken half, and particularly the fighter planes and the combat air patrol. All of that is coming from the Navy. It's been intense. This has been an up-tempo deployment. Correct, sir?
There's no question about it, Steve. When you're in combat like that, even normal peacetime steaming in that area is a full-time job 24/7. And when you're in combat and somebody's lobbing, drones at you or missiles or RPGs from fast attack boats, you've got to be on your toes 24/7. So yeah, it's a high stress environment. It was higher, I'd say, probably during the actual Epic Fury combat operations, and we've had a break there, and then now we've resumed again and had 6, 7, 8 weeks of it, and then there's a gap. So there's ebbs and flows, but it's very intense. And this is the third carrier. We had the Ford, we've had the Bush, and we've had the Lincoln. And the Lincoln was on deployment out in the Western Pacific before she got out there. So she's been working very, very hard. That team is working very hard. So I think the response from the White House and the Defense Department is, I think, really the key which is to say those people that are responsible in the chain of command for making sure that they have fresh food and vegetables, they have munitions, they have fuel, they have security, they even have internet, the sailors have. That's coming from the chain of command. And as Neil correctly pointed out, CNN was on board the Lincoln just a few weeks ago, and everything was fine.
Yeah. And just my kid brother's on the Reasoner as a helicopter pilot. I'd been on the Foster as a destroyer officer earlier. We, I think, spent 100 days. The Reasoner was 76, 77 at sea. You're going to run out when you're in the North Arabian Sea. Hey, you're at sea that long, you're going to run out of vegetables. You're going to run out of fruit, right? Just the logistics itself. So when you have 6,000 people, and the Master Chief Petty Officer always has a coordinating group of a lot of the chiefs' wives, but the wives, to make sure, particularly young sailors and their families, know that they're going to be taken care of. You always have on any deployment issues that come up, right? There's issues come up right away. They're not getting the paycheck, all 1,000 things, and that's the normal course of business. It's sorted out. This is obviously a kind of a historic, to one degree, a little bit of historic deployment. Also, the 250 days at sea with no port calls. People should also understand, when young people sign up for the Navy, one of the trade-offs, hey, if I'm in the Atlantic Fleet, I'm going to go to the Med. There's some great ports of call there that you'll go into. If you're a Pacific Fleet sailor, and this is one of the reasons so many people want to be in the Pacific Fleet, you're going to go to Hong Kong. You're going to go to the Philippines. You're going to go to some of these Singapore. You're going to go to some of these great ports and see the world. In this type of intense operations, you're not getting that. You can have a 10-month or 1-year deployment, and you're not going to make a port of call, and that works on young sailors. Jim, your experience and all that.
Oh, definitely. Port calls are huge for sailors, and that's why when I joined, that was join the Navy, see the world. We wanted to see the world. People wanted to experience that foreign port, so it's a natural thing. And so when you get on a deployment that happens to time up with events that are going on in Iran, you're unfortunately you may not get those. Or I had a port call once on the Kitty Hawk in the Persian Gulf, and we were not allowed to go out into any other ports, and we had to stay pierside at Jebel Ali. So you could get off the boat, but you couldn't go anywhere. It happens, and so these are force protection measures sometimes, or you're in combat. And sailors at the time, they may not like it, but when they get back and they finish that deployment, it's a badge of honor. It says, "Hey, I served and I contributed to our nation's national security, and I gave everything that I could, and I was part of a bigger team." And as you mentioned, there are what they call ombudsmen that represent the sailors at the unit level. So every squadron has an ombudsman. The ship's company has several levels of ombudsmen that are back at the home port, so that family members, wives, children, parents can contact that person if there's some kind of issue. If you're at home and if you're on deployment and your wife has a flood in the kitchen and there's something going wrong, the ombudsman can step in and help get Navy Marine relief monies and things of that nature to you. So there's all kinds of support mechanisms. Is it perfect? No, but there's measures there. And I still remember my first at sea time was on the USS Coral Sea, CV-43 in the Med. And I remember landing on a carrier onboard delivery aircraft, a COD from Sigonella. And we landed on board, and I was with the XO of my squadron, VAQ-133, the Wizards. And when I got off when they opened the back end of the COD and I walked out on the flight deck, it was like a blast wave hit me, and flight operations were going on. And this commander, and I was an ensign, he grabbed my hand and he said, hold my hand and follow me, like I was a 2-year-old child. It's that dangerous. You can die up there. But you learn and you experience it and you go through it and you learn how to, it's a ballet. And we've been doing it for a long time, 100 years of carrier aviation. And this idea that we're leaving our people and we're not taking care of them, or the president doesn't care about our people, is just pure hogwash for political theater. And what we need to get to is, where were these Democrats, where were these other people when we came up and said, hey, we need to pass the budget right now so that we can have funding for the sailors that are at sea? Because there's a whole lot of people in one party that aren't voting to fund that. And guess what? When that funding doesn't come, that means there's going to be perturbations to the resupply system.
If this was, and this is why CNN, and you can tell shift of management doesn't matter. We monitor these things 24 hours a day. The Trump derangement syndrome, and is President Trump perfect? No, he's not. He knows this. He's a very imperfect instrument. He also happens to be one of the top 3 presidents. If you didn't have Trump, you wouldn't have a country right now, for all his faults. CNN, and they were just on the Lincoln, right? And everything was fine. And look, when you say everything's fine with CNN's on, remember, a lot of sailors are not going to, they're going to, take one for the team, even if some conditions are tough. And conditions are tough. The Navy's tough. You go on an aircraft carrier and you're out for 10 months, 12 months, a year. You get 250 days straight at sea and no ports of call. It's hard, and you're in up-tempo air ops in the most dangerous, territory on Earth. Is that flight deck during launch and recovery? Those kids and those pilots, you got to be on it, and it wears on you day in and day out. That's what combat is. That's how we won in the Pacific in World War II. These sailors in that ship is the exact lineage of the Pacific, of the 7th Fleet in World War II, and that's why it's been so terrific. And I said, hey, if one person's fallen off or jumped off or whatever, that's terrible. But haven't done enough plane guard and back of carriers. They're losing people. I'm not saying all the time, but it's so difficult. You get blown off the deck. You have people fall off. These are dangerous, dangerous, dangerous places. And I think the crew and the officers to be complimented. Let's play. I want to play Pete Hexa because I think the Pentagon finally got engaged in this. Let's play Pete. And I want to bring a Neil in about how we got involved in this, because there is a logistics issue, and it centers in, wait for it, the Persian Gulf and Bahrain. Let's hear Pete Hegseth, Secretary of War.
Completely misrepresented. Listen, we make sure at every ship, every crew, every captain has everything we can provide them at every single moment. Some deployments are longer than others, and I have more respect and gratitude for those sailors than anybody. What they do in those high seas and those austere conditions with less port calls, it's incredible. I mean, Americans don't understand what it's like to do that. So as someone who's not been on a ship like that, but been on long deployments, I feel it. I want them home as soon as everybody else do. I want folks rotated as quickly as possible. I want the best for them. My commanders know that. Our service secretaries know that. The president expects that. And so to that crew and to all those crews, we're going to do everything we can for you. And we are so grateful for their dedication of that crew and others. They've held the line for the country, and they've done a fantastic job.
CNN and MSNBC, let me be blunt, brutally frank. They're trying to stir up a mutiny. You can see by the angle of attack they're reporting, they're not there to help the sailors. They're trying to weaponize the enlisted men and women on that carrier, not simply against the officers, but about the entire chain of command, including the commander-in-chief. Full stop. It's obvious if you watch it and you know the reality. And I'm not saying that everything's peaches and cream on the Lincoln. Guess what? It's not going to be. You're in a deployment in air operations 24/7. Neil McCabe, your thoughts on this issue? We're going to go to break here in about 90 seconds. Your thoughts?
Yeah, CNN and MSNBC, they're like Lord Haha or Tokyo Rose. But yeah, what they're trying to do is they're trying to figure out, how do we keep these ships resupplied? There's like 24 warships out there. There's a handful of military Sea Lift Command ships trying to do these resupplies. Bahrain has the top facilities and the warehouses, but Bahrain was hit in March. They've tried to set up these sort of ancillary and secondary depots, But again, they're all within range of the Iranian missiles. And of course, you talk about the dangers of flight ops, replenishment at sea, when you have those wires connecting two ships, that's also extremely dangerous and makes you extremely vulnerable. So there are many challenges there.
Neil, should they have planned around Bahrain as the logistics center, the Fifth Fleet's logistics center? Should people have thought about that through? I mean, they didn't. I want you to answer this after we come back from break. Was there enough thought put into Strait of Hormuz, Persian Gulf, and particularly the logistics center of the Fifth Fleet in Bahrain? Because one might argue, if any replenishment issues could have been taken care of, maybe some more planning went into it. Anyway, we're going to get into that. Natalie Winter's going to join us. I want Jim Fanell to stick around. Natalie's reporting this past week has been brutal on certain flag officers in regards to their seditious and treasonous behavior with the existential threat of the Chinese Communist Party. We're going to take a short commercial break. We're going to return to the war room in just a moment.
We rejoice when there's no more. Let's take down the CCP.
War Room. Here's your host, Stephen K. Bannon.
Captain Fanell, the engine room reminds me, don't forget Mark Kelly, Captain Kelly, and all these people early on that made a video, looked right in the camera, and told enlisted people, you don't have to follow the orders. If you think it's an unjust order, you don't have to follow it, reminding people of this. They were trying to stir it up then. Okay, this has nothing to do with the crew and the families of the Lincoln. If it did, I wouldn't have a problem with this. This is not about that. What they are trying to do, CNN, MSNBC, these people are on there, right? And Kelly and that crew, there's one continuum here, and that is they are trying to get an insurrection or a mutiny against the chain of command, and particularly President Trump, to show that he's unfeeling, he's uncaring, he's incompetent, all of it. And what they did before those videos, they should have been prosecuted for that, because that was directly trying to entice people not to follow the orders of the chain of command. Captain Fanell, thoughts, observations?
Yes, Steve, I agree with you. They could care less really about the sailors. If they cared about the sailors at sea, then they wouldn't be pushing back and not voting for the budget for National Defense Authorization Act for 2027. And they'd get the money now and they'd act and then make their reforms or changes other ways. But they don't really care. And as you said, they're making political statements they know will get out to the families of that carrier and out to sea, because they have access to the internet when you're underway today. You get emails, you get access, and they're fomenting this, and it's disgraceful. They should be ashamed of themselves. And for those that have been in the military and retired, they're still under the UCMJ, and they should be very cautious about what they say. And I'm just really disappointed, because if you cared about the sailors, then you'd say to yourself, why has the Navy been in decline for 35 years? Why have we gutted the U.S. Navy for 35 years? Where are the people of principle when it's something of substance? And it's only during these little crisis times before elections that we see this kind of charade, this circus game that we get from the politicians. It's disgusting.
Should we have prosecuted Captain Mark Kelly when he made that video, sir?
Well, they went through the process on that, and he's been, not convicted of anything. So I guess, I'm not a JAG and I'm not an attorney, but I think that he had been held to account, at least in some semblance, by the court of public opinion for what he did. We've got to get serious about our national security and how we play these games. We can't have people going out and piping up on these kind of things just because they want to take a political shot when it comes at the expense of people that are at sea. There hasn't been any ramp strikes on board the USS Abraham Lincoln. When I was on my first carriers at sea, and Air Wing 11, not my first, and when I was a lieutenant commander, and I lived with the operations officer, and he told me when he joined in the mid 80s that the mortality rate for naval aviators was up around 25%. We don't have that today. We're constantly making our improvements to the safety and security of our sailors, but we're not right now because we have people that are trying to politicize it, and we're not getting to the causes of why is it that the Lincoln's out there for 7 months? Why was it that the Ford was out there for 11 months? It's not just because this is a new issue. It's because we're the United States of America, and we have global interests, we have global alliances, we have global partnerships, and we have to be in these places. And when things happen, when perturbations happen, when crises happen, you have to be able to surge. And this idea of just-in-time maintenance, this just in time, we'll just build enough of a minimum amount of this ship or that ship, doesn't understand or has forgotten the reality of combat and war and dealing with these kind of issues. And even today, it's even worse in some sense because a country like Iran can lob off, some ballistic missiles and some drones and really cause an uproar. And it makes it difficult for us to get things under control. But if we had a 600-ship Navy, things would be a lot different than they are right now.
And those decisions have to be made at a higher level, and that's what we should have a national debate about. I'm a huge believer in this hemispheric defense. Use the Central Pacific as your strategic pivot, the three-island chain. The Navy will play a much bigger role in that. I will tell you, the defense bill they're passing still has us spread all over hell's half acre. So you can't hold the crews. The up tempo and the synchronous tempo is you're trying to play the old game with virtually no resources, and this is why you have a problem. Hangover Captain, I want you to hang around. Natalie's going to join us. I want to talk about her investigation of these flag officers. McCabe, while we got a minute, and by the way, I want to thank Birch Gold. Birch Gold's obviously our sponsor, End of the Dollar Empire. You'll find out why the petrodollar is so important and have a discussion about the petrodollar. Birchgold.com/Bannon, End of the Dollar Empire. 8 free installments, no obligation, all free. You'll learn about the history of fiat currency in the United States and the economy. And you talk to Philip Patry and team. Do it today. McCabe, we got about 90 seconds. Bahrain. Why is Bahrain so important to making sure the fleet can actually fight in the North Arabian Sea when that is captured in the Persian Gulf, sir?
Bahrain, the naval supply facilities and port facilities, that should have been moved 5 years ago. The United States Army had 3 bases in Qatar. They moved all 3 of them 5 and 6 years ago because of the Iranian threat. And it's more than just hooking up shore ties, Steve. You need cranes, right? You need a deep port. You need, because these ships have a draft. It's like Bahrain is the port with the port facilities and the warehouses and everything's centralized there. Perhaps it's because, Qatar used to be a colony of Bahrain. Now Bahrain is sort of a cat's paw of Saudi Arabia. It could be that geopolitically, the Navy or the Biden administration didn't want to upset the Saudis. But the fact of the matter is, they need to go somewhere else. You can't have your supply hub in the middle of a combat zone.
McCabe, stick around. You're going to be with us for part of the second hour. Captain Fanell's going to stick with us. Natalie's going to join us. Big updates on DFW, on the, feet washing facility. Get to all that. But we're also going to talk about her amazing reporting about flag officers and where their allegiance is. Are they playing footsie with the existential threat to the United States of America, the Chinese Communist Party, or are they patriots? Find out everything about that. Take your phone at Bannon, Bannon, 989898. The ultimate guide for investing in gold and precious metals in the age of Trump. It's totally free and no obligation. Get it today.